the more vulnerable and the more open and the more honest you are about what you're experiencing and what you desire, and even, you know, vulnerability within artwork, right? Like sharing what it is that comes from you, not coming from a space where you feel apprehensive about sharing your work, but rather being confident in the fact that like, this is a part of me, this is a part of my emotional body, and I kind of want the world to see it because it deserves to be seen. You know, when you embrace that level of just intimacy with yourself, everything that is in alignment with your truth is going to fall right into your path, like the most, oh my god, so easily. Hi everyone! I have a good feeling about this video, so I hope that this isn't just my own narcissism. Hi guys! I hope you are well, or as well as you possibly can be, given the circumstances of existing. I feel like that has become like my templated hello. And maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe I should stop affirming the fact that reality is crazy, but honestly reality is always going to be crazy. I watched this, like, me fully going on an immediate tangent, I watched this TikTok of like Aaron Johnson like dancing and just had this like narrative about how life is always going to be a roller coaster and the universe does not care about your plans, so you should probably just roll with it instead of trying to control it. And I have been embracing the fact that, you know, I can't control the fact that everything is going to be wild and a constant ebb and flow, but I can control how I respond to it and how I roll with the punches. So I hope that with whatever punches you are rolling with, that you're doing so as gracefully as possible. And that maybe there is ice cream involved in the process, right? Or donuts. I'm thinking a lot about donuts these days. My name is Jasmine Kylene. I'm a spiritual counselor, I'm a journalist, human being having a good time, and I wanted to make a video today mainly because I have on makeup and I don't typically have on makeup, so anytime I do I'm like, well, as many people need to see me as possible, but I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to make a video on. So I've been like wrestling. I have like a whole list of ideas of like things that I want to talk about and things that I think could really, you know, benefit anyone who ends up finding my voice and resonating with it, and none of them really did anything for me. And I was kind of like, part of me just wants to sit down in front of this little camera and just talk about what I'm feeling and where I'm at in life right now. And upon reflecting on the fact that I even desired to do that, I realized that that was something that was so just like inherently vulnerable that I prior would have never thought to do. You know, I've tried to be like, fun fact, a little insight on my life, I've like had many lives on YouTube. Like when I was a kid, I would make like dance videos on YouTube, and then I like tried vlogging, but like, I don't know, me sort of being myself never really stuck because I don't think I was practicing being vulnerable and being, I think, fully authentic and who I was and what my identity was in my waking life, so it couldn't really translate on a digital space. And now that I'm in the most like radically vulnerable and radically authentic place ever in my entire life, so much has shifted and I've experienced such an opening when it comes to the things that I want to manifest and the things that I want to fill my life with. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the power and vulnerability. And, you know, if you are someone who doesn't identify as a person that is comfortable with vulnerability, then why I would invite you to sort of dance with that discomfort, and why sitting in vulnerability and the discomfort that it inherently brings and inevitably brings is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. So I guess that's an intro. The way I just immediately started talking is ridiculous, but the very first thing that I want to say is that, you know, vulnerability was difficult for me for a lot of different reasons. I think the first being that like I'm an Aquarius, so like being secretive is just kind of like my kryptonite a little bit, but also just like there was a lot of instances within my childhood where I kind of felt like I had to be quiet and I had to like upkeep a certain image in regards to like my family and myself even, and just like there was a lot of truth, especially me being like an only child, that was kind of only within myself, and I didn't really know if there was a safe space for me to express it. And so now that I'm in a space where I'm kind of taking back the power when it comes to my voice, I'm almost oversharing because of the fact that I didn't realize how muting your voice can really mute a part of your soul and a part of like your mental wellness. And I found that within this life that I've chosen, in which I'm the most like radically vulnerable, I've deepened everything. I mean, every single relationship that I have now is really, really, really intentional, very present, very honest, very open, and very safe and sacred to me. And I've found that the more I've been vulnerable, the more I've been able to attract soul family and people who are actually like in alignment with the kind of life that I want to live. So I think that's the very first point that I want to immediately share, is the fact that like the more vulnerable and the more open and the more honest you are about what you're experiencing and what you desire, and even, you know, vulnerability within artwork, right? Like sharing what it is that comes from you and what you actually, you know, not coming from a space where you feel apprehensive about sharing your work, but rather being confident in the fact that like, this is a part of me, this is a part of my emotional body, and I kind of want the world to see it because it deserves to be seen. You know, when you embrace that level of just intimacy with yourself, everything that is in alignment with your truth is going to fall right into your path, like the most, oh my god, so easily. You know, for me, I started off my journalistic career wanting to be like this entertainment journalist, and I was going to be on E! News, and I was going to talk about Kim Kardashian for like 24 hours a day, and I was okay with that. And like the opportunities for me to build that career, they came, but they came, I mean, to be honest, they didn't really come, honestly. They came in very, very small amounts, and it felt like I was constantly trying to build something that was like just incessantly caving in on itself. And I realized that I wasn't being authentic with what I wanted, and I wasn't being vulnerable with what it is that I actually was feeling when it came to like that industry, and what it was that I actually had interest in, and what I was feeling about myself, and the insecurities that came up with, you know, working in an environment that was so hyper-focused and hyper-fixated on the physical, right? Like that's a really competitive market, and it's all about what you look like, and it was kind of driving me a little bit insane, but I held it in because I wasn't comfortable with vulnerability. But the minute that I started being more vulnerable with the fact that like this doesn't feel like a safe space for my mental and physical and emotional wellness, and you know, like the conversations and the dialogues that opened up for people that were also experiencing that, it introduced me to like, well, what does feel right, and having those conversations with people. And the more that I danced with what my body actually wanted and really exploring it out loud, I found what it is that I wanted. And now that I'm in this world of spirituality and wellness and empowerment, like the opportunities are non-stop coming to me because of the fact that I'm so open. So I think, to make that point succinct, and by the way, this whole video I'm just gonna be talking, so like if you find something within any of the words, just save it, because I don't know what's happening right now. But what was I just saying? So yeah, so the more that you are vulnerable with yourself, and vulnerable out loud, and like radically vulnerable, the more that opportunities that are in alignment with your truth are going to find you. Because I find that when you are vulnerable, you are essentially wearing your truth on your sleeve. You're embodying honesty, and I think that honesty just is like the clearest possible channel when it comes to manifestation, right? If you are not being vulnerable out loud, then there must be some sort of lie that you're telling yourself as well. Because if you're presenting yourself and showing up in spaces where you aren't sharing what it is that you're really going through, or you aren't sharing your true self, or you aren't really, you're wearing any sort of mask and playing into any sort of facade, there's a block that you're creating with the universe. There's a block that you're creating within like the manifestation currents, right? Because if you aren't showing up openly, where can anything get through? And that goes also for like, you know, if you're in a space where you want to manifest perhaps a certain partnership in your life, or if you want more friends, or if you want more opportunities, just kind of like, you need to be showing up fully as yourself before that can even recognize you. You need to become the mirror of what you desire. And if you are embodying sort of like this, just this fake way of being, you're only going to attract more falsehoods. Me saying words. A video. It's also important to note that you can, I think my friend Hannah like coined this term, but like you can have a vulnerability hangover. So obviously, of course, with everything there's a balance, and I think, you know, really making sure that you know who your safe spaces are when it comes to being vulnerable. That doesn't mean you have to constantly share everything with everyone at every given moment. So, you know, always check in with your gut instincts. If you're in a space where you know your gut is sort of telling you this isn't the safest, or maybe your interests or your best interests aren't at mind. Is that the phrase? My best interests aren't at heart. They ain't looking out for you. You can allow yourself to be more reserved, and that doesn't mean lying, that doesn't mean putting up a fake facade, but that means sort of like withholding your vulnerability and saving it for spaces and for people and for circumstances where it is held and it is uplifted. And if you find that maybe, you know, perhaps you have a lot of like water influence in your chart, and you're someone who is sort of overtly vulnerable all the time, recognizing what reeling that back in and simply approaching life on a more playful manner can do for you is important. But honestly, being vulnerable doesn't need to be something that's so heavy. I think sometimes it can be, but also sometimes it's honestly the complete opposite. If anything, I think vulnerability has taken the power away from a lot of the things that were really draining and depleting me. You know, I've experienced a lot of different, you know, emotional turbulence in my life, and the more that I've talked about them, especially within like sacred community, the less that they've had a hold on me and played a role in my mental health. So I say that to say that sometimes speaking on something is the way to break its chains. And you know, that can be therapy, that can be an online group, that can be within friendships that resonate with you, it can be with family, just making sure that you have that safe space and that you are releasing whatever it is that you're holding in is really going to take the power away from whatever is holding you back from feeling your best or evolving or healing. Sometimes the healing itself happens when it's simply spoken on, and when it's spoken on in a space where it's understood and where you feel seen. Because truthfully, you can't feel seen if you aren't being yourself, and that doesn't mean you can't be yourself without being vulnerable, but it just means, are you being your true authentic self if you're hiding or concealing what it is that you're experiencing? And I think that's how we take the power back from this like really controlling patriarchy that kind of wants us to all abide by this like, just, child, you know what, let me not even get into it. But on that vein, I do want to say that like part of the reason why part of the way that I rebuilt my relationship with Instagram is the way that I've approached showing up on there. I think for a long time Instagram was just a place for pretty pictures and sort of this highlight reel, but I realized the role that that was playing when I was looking at other people's highlight reels. I feel like I constantly would go on Instagram and see just like ideal relationships and perfect bodies and like just whatever I, you know, didn't have in my life, I suddenly desired it so deeply because I would see other people have it. And it was something that I complained about incessantly, but also realized that I was playing into, because when I was having my more difficult days, when I was, you know, unable to get out of bed, or when I was, you know, whatever the fuck, I was not putting that on Instagram. I was only uploading the selfies and the rainbows and the sunshine. And you know, 2020 was a year that kind of forced me to be radically vulnerable, and within that, I've let that trickle into how I show up online, and it has changed so much of my experience of Instagram and social media. Because yes, I still post when I'm feeling cute, but I also post when I'm feeling shitty, and I think that that has deepened my relationships with the people that I interact with on Instagram. It's also made me more intentional with the people that I follow on Instagram. And I think if we all embrace what it means to show every part of ourselves in a way that is honest, I think that that can be the way that we change the narrative of like the role that social media is playing for our generation's mental health. But you know, not me on a soapbox. So yeah, be vulnerable with your emotions, be vulnerable with your mental health, you know, speak up, and be vulnerable with your art. You know, I think that I think that sometimes we can conceal the things that are worth being seen because of insecurities or fear, or just simply lack of intimacy when it comes to vulnerability. So just like rebuilding that relationship and trusting that like this deserves to be seen, and I'm putting it in a space where it is going to be admired, and I'm putting this in a place where I'm going to receive what I'm worth, which is praise and recognition and perhaps even monetary value. Like recognizing that like the vulnerability within that is really important. And know that, you know, sometimes vulnerability can be hard. You know, I'm embracing vulnerability in a lot of areas where it is held safe and sacred, you know, within sisterhood once again, but I'm also embracing vulnerability within, you know, my relationship with certain family members, which is more difficult than I think war. Don't quote me on that, don't come for me, army stands, but it really is really difficult. But you know, I'm in therapy, which is another form of vulnerability, and I'm recognizing the fact that it is through being vulnerable and through speaking and honoring your truth that you experience the most tangible growth. And I promise you, you will meet a brand new version of yourself on the other side if you come face to face with what it means to be vulnerable in spaces where maybe being vulnerable calls for some bravery and calls for maybe the dissemination, that's a word, dissemination of certain relationships that you maybe put a lot of identity in, and maybe that we're a bit codependent or whatever the case may be. And it's also worth noting that when you embrace vulnerability in one space in your life, it's kind of hard to not embrace vulnerability in every other aspect of your life. So like, me embracing vulnerability when it came to my mental health and my emotional health and my spiritual health, that changed also like how I showed up in my sexual relationships and how I showed up with the way that I, just how I relate to my family members. You know, I think once you realize how freeing it is to be vulnerable in one area of your life, it's immediate how much of a boundary you're holding up in other areas of your life and how it's important that those are taken down as well. And yeah, and then like lies start to feel much heavier than ever before because you're very used to being this clear channel. I promise you, you will manifest so much easier the minute that you embrace what it means to be honest. And that doesn't mean, you know, being mean or being harsh or being critical, but rather like just honoring what your truth is and walking in alignment with what your truth is at all given times, even if it makes someone uncomfortable that maybe deserves to be uncomfortable in that given moment, because maybe that's how they grow. And lastly, I think if anything this year I have met the deepest parts of myself through my vulnerability, through the way that I've been vulnerable in my external relationships. I've really built a solid foundation with what intimacy and vulnerability looks like on like my own personal relationship with myself. So I've discovered, you know, how radically important it is for me to keep my inner child alive because of the fact that like just me and my vulnerability means me embracing the fact that I am 14 years old, but also still very womanly and very sexy. It's introduced me to new interests that I liked. It's also just like allowed me to have like sisterhood and friendships that I would have never had I not embraced vulnerability, and those have poured into me in ways that I can't even explain. So know that within embracing a lifestyle of vulnerability, you are really committing to like an entire identity revolution and evolution, obviously, and it's our superpower. If we all are just open and honest with what it is that we're experiencing and what this journey is, you'll find that so many people are going through these parallel experiences that we are all experiencing, we're just not talking about, and it opens space for you to forgive yourself and to embrace yourself and to find others that are on that same exact journey, and it allows you to feel comfortable in wearing yourself more loudly. I think it's important that we all come out of, you know, this collective experience we've been through in 2020 really owning our colors and the ways in which we are unique, and you can't really do that if you don't have an honest relationship with yourself. So be vulnerable with the people and the spaces that feel safe and sacred to you. Challenge yourself if you feel like there is any area in your life where you are putting up a facade, whether it's at work or in social media or in some friendships or relationships that you have, even in your family dynamics, if you feel like you're playing a role to maintain status quo or to maintain communal comfort. Challenge what it looks like to be radically vulnerable and embrace the fact that you deserve to be yourself and you deserve to speak how you feel and what your perspective is and what you've experienced out loud. And if you think that you are experiencing something in a vacuum and that you're the only one who's going through any sort of emotion or any sort of just like life obstacle, know that no, I promise you no. I know that there's someone else out there that can relate to you, and that there's a lot of healing that can come out of relating to people and speaking out loud. I mean, I'm sure that this is a video I would have never made even a year ago, and I am fairly certain that there's at least one human being who's gonna watch this and feel really understood and seen and maybe even pushed to be more vulnerable through my words. So know that like there's kind of a domino effect when it comes to being yourself radically and openly. So I hope that made sense. If anything, this is a lesson on the fact that like I should always start a video with clear direction on what the video is. I kind of just started talking, but this is what's on my mind and my heart right now, so I decided to be vulnerable. But yeah, that's basically it. Okay. Yeah, that is basically it. So I hope that you took something from this, and if anything, I would give you homework to challenge yourself at least for the next week to be more vulnerable in whatever area of your life you decide it to be, whether it is in your emotional field or in your relationship or maybe with your work, you know, being more vulnerable and posting it on your social media and saying, hey, I made this song, or I drew this painting, or whatever, you know, I think it deserves to be seen. So look at it, you know, promote yourself, feel confident in the fact that within your vulnerability, you are enabling somebody who you don't even know is watching you and giving them permission to embrace their own vulnerability and to step into their truth. And that is the whole point of this whole human thing. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an incredible life. Feel free to subscribe, feel free to follow me on Instagram. at Jasmine Kylene, or visit lollyluda.tv for more conscious content, or if you want to book a one-on-one with me, because I am a counselor, so I do one-on-ones, I do chair, I do readings, I do cards, I do all of it, baby. I'm here for you. And yeah, that's it. Bye.